today.
Yeah. So.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the first meeting back after summer break. Usually it's a council meeting, but we get to be first this year. So I'm going to call to order the August 7th, 2026 meeting of the Climate and Sustainability Committee. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lu?
Here.
Mayor Rickner?
Here.
Councilmember Burt?
Here.
For the record, 3 present.
Excellent. All right, well, let's move on to in-person public comment. Do we have any?
We have one request to speak. Schwenner?
Yeah, I'll just say preliminarily, yeah, please go ahead and take a seat, that there's been some change in law with respect to public comment, took effect over the summer. And so we will be doing in-person public comment at the beginning. And if there is any virtual public comment, we will do that at the end. So with that, welcome. Just going to put a little timer on this thing.
Good afternoon, Mayor Beaker, council members, Burt and Lou, city staff, and community members. My name is Schwenner Dawn, and I'm a Palo Alto resident and student. I'm speaking today about the environmental oversight of AI data centers. So artificial intelligence may seem like an invisible digital technology, but the infrastructure supporting it is extremely physical. So data centers require substantial electricity, water, cooling equipment, backup generation, land, and public infrastructure. According to the Department of Energy's 2024 United States Data Center Energy Usage Report, American data centers consume approximately 176 terawatt hours of electricity in 2023, about 4.4% of total national electricity use. And by 2028, that share could rise to as much as 12%. These national numbers have local consequences because data center impacts are concentrated in the communities and utility systems supporting them. A major facility may require new electrical substations, transmission capacity, water infrastructure, and emergency response resources. Yet residents and local officials often cannot determine how much electricity or water an individual facility uses, or how its cooling system operates, how frequently its backup generators run, or who will pay for related infrastructure. Corporate sustainability reports generally provide company-wide or regional totals rather than standardized facility-level information. I therefore propose a public environmental ledger for major data centers and computing facilities. It would disclose electricity consumption and peak demand, water use, cooling technology, energy sources, emissions, backup generator operations, infrastructure requirements, public incentives, and responsibility for related costs. This information should be independently verified and updated regularly. This proposal will not prevent technological development. Palo Alto is a center of innovation, but technological leadership should also include environmental transparency and responsible infrastructure planning. I respectfully ask the committee to recommend that appropriate city staff conduct a preliminary review of this proposal and examine whether facility-level environmental disclosure could be incorporated into future sustainability planning, utility planning, procurement standards, or developmental approvals. Responsible AI development requires responsible infrastructure governments. Thank you.
Thank you. We have any further public comment?
That concludes public comment.
All right. Thank you. So we'll move on to staff comments. Director Eccleston.
Thank you, Chair Beaker. We do have a couple announcements from staff. So the Youth Climate Advisory Board, some members of which are here with us today, will be starting their new cohort for the year in September. And just wanted to note, due to the large number of qualified applicants, the cohort for the new school year, 2026 through 2027, will have 13 members, which is an increase from the previous 11. There will be 4 returning members and 7 new members, representing 4 different Palo Alto high schools and every grade level. And then also wanted to note that the Palo Alto horizontal levee pilot project completion celebration is scheduled for Thursday, September 10th at 11 a.m. at the levee site located at 2470 Embarcadero Road in Palo Alto. Wanted to note there that parking is limited at the project location. Attendees are encouraged to park kind of around the corner for free at 1900 Embarcadero Road. So that's at the intersection of Embarcadero Road and Embarcadero Way. So please join us for a short speakers program, ribbon cutting ceremony, and community trail walk to officially recognize the opening of the relocated and widened trail connecting hikers and bakers to the Baylands Nature Preserve, Bixby Park Trails, and San Francisco Bay Trail System. And just noting refreshments and snacks will also be provided.
Very important.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
So one note is that you encourage people to park at a given location as opposed to we should be encouraging people to ride there. And if they cannot ride, here's the alternative parking. David Cole continues to remind me that we as a city do not on special events by default advocate for riding. And here we are SCAP and we're encouraging people to drive to there.
Fair enough. What it's really meant is for those who may be driving, but good point.
But really, I think we should build into our communications for special events this concept of default is encouraging people to go by active transportation and then provide alternatives.
All right. Anything further from staff?
No, that's it.
Well, except for the active transportation part.
You have the city electric bikes now.
So let's move on to committee member comments and announcements. Colleagues? No? No. I just wanted to quickly report that the Air District rules that we talk about from time to time are with respect to our own heat pump programs, that the staff recommendations are out now, were released over the summer with respect to proposed amendments to the proposed amendments that will be considered this fall, and that I won't go into the details, but than to mention that the recommended implementation date that will be taken up by the board is now January 1st of 2028. And the board will be considering those amendments on Wednesday, November 4th. I also just wanted to mention, given our student public comment, that you'll be glad to know that just this morning I was down in San Jose at a San Jose Spotlight digital panel on data centers, and that we discussed the very issues you raised, and that there are some guidelines out and about in the country. Climate Mayors has put out an entire recommendation as to how one can consider these factors. So I'm glad you brought them up. And so has the C40 Mayors, which is a global organization. And I have signed on to that Sustainable Data Centers Pact. So doesn't mean there's not more to do. Thank you for raising it, but I thought you'd want to know that there is a lot of conversation around that issue. All right, that's it. So with that, let's move on to our first action item, the Youth Climate Advisory Board Annual Report. Director Eggleston.
And I will turn it over to Sustainability Manager Christine Long, who will introduce this item.
Thank you. So today we are joined by our 2025 to 2026 Youth Climate Advisory Board, or YCAB, leadership team. The chair, Aidan Miao, and two vice chairs, Chanu Kim, and online we have Jenna Mu, and they will report on the wonderful work they did this past semester, or school year, sorry.
Terrific. Welcome. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, council members. It's great to be here today. We're presenting the annual report for the Youth Climate Advisory Board's second term. As mentioned, I'm Aiden. I'm Janelle.
And I'm Jenna.
And Jenna is joining from Zoom. Yes. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so our team consists of 11 members across 4 Palo Alto high schools. 8 were returning and 3 of us were new. Unfortunately, I believe 7 of us were seniors who will no longer be with us next year, but the remaining 4 of us, including all 3 of us here up today, will be returning next year. Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. So the goal of the Youth Climate Advisory Board is to serve as an advisory body of high school students, focused on bridging the gap between city level climate projects, initiatives, policy, and youth in Palo Alto. And we're organized into 5 different subcommittees. So we have zero waste, electrification, mobility, adaptation, and media. And across the subcommittees, we do different projects, again, focusing on bridging that gap. And we'll hear about zero waste right now. Next slide, please.
Yeah, to start off with the subcommittees, this year the Zero Waste Subcommittee reached over 500 students in Palo Alto schools through a variety of different educational outreach programs. We educated local students on zero waste practices and proper trash sorting techniques at Fletcher Middle School, and we continued that engagement through starting the Green Heroes program, a club where students can take the initiative to mentor peers about zero waste and support climate efforts at Fletcher. Beyond formal education, we also tabled at events like the Teen Arts Council clothing swap with activities like the basketball style trash sorting games, courtesy of Michael Capello of the Public Works Department. While tabling, we also publicized our zero waste survey, which analyzes the relationship between access to climate education and different socioeconomic factors. And currently we're conducting data analysis and writing a review based on this correlation. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so as for our electrification subcommittee, we focused a lot towards us tabling at elementary schools. That included an activity developed by our chair, Aiden, which was a mystery box sensory activity where there would be 2 different items in 2 different boxes. And children would have to be identifying the objects by feel, and they were to explain the difference between the efficiency and the safety aspects involved with electrification. So for example, that was like a light bulb versus a candle, or a ruler versus a measuring tape. Through that initiative, we reached 100 students across families at the elementary schools of Duvnik, Juan of Briones, Nixon, and Palo Verde. During that activity, we would also distribute activity sheets and parent resources. So these would be sheets with an electrification activity on one side. On the other side, there would be a QR code linking towards electrification rebate and support programs for parents to use at home. Next slide, please.
So the mobility team this term focused primarily on public transportation. One of the things we did was a presentation at one of Palo Alto's private middle schools where we taught over 150 students about their specific local options in their area. And through that, we also help them sign up for Youth Clipper cards, which give discounts for the VTA bus as well as Caltrain. We also provided an official recommendation for the San Antonio Road Area Plan, using results from the previous term's youth transit survey with over 200 responses, giving youth input on local public transportation options. We also wrote and filmed a public transportation 101 video where we explained how to use the VTA bus as well as Caltrain, and showed local biking options around the city. And we showed that to 200 students at Casalea, and this term we also have plans to distribute it to PAUSD. Lastly, we led the education at Safe Routes to School bike programs across PAUSD middle and high schools, where we taught students about the safe routes to take and also good bike practices. Next slide, please.
This term, the Adaptation Subcommittee, which is a new subcommittee, mainly worked on outreach through co-hosting a succulent planning workshop at the Clay Sustains Family Day event, which was a family-friendly event hosted by the Palo Alto Art Center in celebration of their new clay-centered gallery. Through this event, which Adaptation co-hosted with the Zero Waste Subcommittee, we reached over 100 families with a succulent planting activity. And through this activity, we hope to instill a love for plants and caring for the environment in the new generation. Beyond this, we also attempted to start a rain barrel program at PAUSD schools in order to support school gardens. But unfortunately, we discovered that this wasn't feasible, but we hope to continue adjusted plans with rain barrels next term. Next slide, please.
And of course, we have the media subcommittee. They focus on our outreach and most of outreach digitally or physically. And that was in the form of newsletters and Instagram posts. For example, they designed a Meet the Team social media post, post subcommittee updates, and general event recap posts, which garnered thousands of views across platforms. Of course, there was also posters and physical media. and they helped design over 10 posters, pamphlets, and physical media for events and projects during the school year, as well as for recruitment purposes. Sorry, I couldn't find.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so this term, YCAB, had a lot of impact, primarily with education of the next generation of climate advocates at PUSD and private schools in Palo Alto. In total, we educated thousands of students across different topics such as zero waste, electrification, transportation. And we also did some work on policy by writing some recommendations, and we currently have some other papers in progress with implications for policy as well. Next slide, please.
Once again, thank you so much to all of the staff support at the City of Palo Alto for empowering local youth and truly making this board happen. We especially want to thank Mabo Ao Young, Olivia Trevino, Amanda De Jesus, and Tina Keegan for support with individual subcommittee projects. And an overarching thank you to Anna Freitas and Christine Long for guiding the board and truly making all of this climate action possible. The YCAB can speak on behalf of all Palo Alto students that we truly appreciate the opportunity to bring youth voices to sustainability in Palo Alto and help contribute to a more sustainable future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's terrific. I really appreciate your support and your report, well, and your support. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. Our first speaker is, oh, I'm so sorry. For item 1, there are currently no requests to speak.
Okay, and anyone in the room would like to speak? No. Okay, well then.
Give them a hand.
Yeah.
I would love to do that, yes. Yeah, really, truly just terrific, what you've been doing and are going to do. I'll let my colleagues speak and then I'll add some thoughts on. So, George?
Thank you. I've loved hearing these updates. It's wonderful to see you both again. Yeah, I want to congratulate everyone for working together well, for moving a lot of initiatives forward. I have a couple of questions, if
Yes.
this is the right time. I love the initiative and the thought about rain barrels and how to reuse water or use water efficiently in this sort of local context in a way that's visible to students. I know it's carrying over to next year. I think that's I can imagine the logistical and also some of the cost barriers that come up working with PUSD, organizing something like this. I and another colleague who's not here are on the city school liaison committee. We work with the school district all the time. Is there any barrier or anything that we can help with or that you can speak to? We would love to help online or offline. So I just want to phrase that question, but also leave the open door there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that offer. I think Jenna worked a lot on rain barrels. Jenna, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, the main barriers we found were financial ones. This was before we worked with the new PAUSD sustainability coordinator. But I think the majority of barriers which we faced were mainly financial and kind of trying to get the schools on board, especially with the schools being so busy throughout the year. We faced a lot of barriers in terms of kind of not the inability to implement these like throughout the school year, and schools didn't necessarily see like a need for them. But I think if we can attack it in sort of a different angle through looking at it more so in terms of student engagement, that might be something we can try next year and try to integrate it more into curriculum. So yeah, I guess the main two barriers were one, a financial barrier, and two, maybe trying to integrate it more into curriculum. But that was something we mainly did earlier in the term that we weren't able to get too far with, but we really appreciate the help.
Yeah, on the financial barrier note, there is a council contingency fund, so council directed fund for sort of grants and sort of smaller programs and sort of community building, community beneficial programs throughout the year that don't need to be budgeted up front so rigidly. And so I think that's definitely a offline conversation that we could have. Yeah, and I appreciate the initiative and hope we can unblock anything that you need unblocked in this coming year.
Thank you,
Yeah,
council
that-
member. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely follow up on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks for a really great update. First, to the highest level, I was trying in my own mind recall the programs that the your committee had done in previous years as it was really getting off the ground. And my sense is that you have really scaled it this year. Is that basically what has happened?
I think that is definitely true. Yeah, this was our second term. We had impact our first year, but this year we scaled it up a lot, especially with our focus on education.
Yeah, I mean, the breadth of it, what you're doing now, I'm just really pleased with. I do want to echo Councilmember Liu's offer. If there are certain initiatives that you would need funding for and in short order, we potentially could help supplement that. And basically our process can even be more streamlined than if it went through the regular city budgeting process, but there may be resources from both directions. One of the big things that we are struggling with is retrofitting of existing residential buildings. And one of the areas that we are really pivoting on in communication is the negative health impacts of methane in the home. And I've thought for a long while that students becoming educated about these risks and taking that message to their own homes would have a powerful influence, that parents would respond to that. First of all, many parents don't know that they're exposing their children to significantly higher risks of childhood asthma and other health risks. So I'm interested in whether that has been an area that you've been talking about, and whether that is something that you think that you might be able to scale in your communications somehow this coming year with our support.
Yeah, I definitely think that safety, and especially for children, has been one of the speaking points regarding electrification. But I do agree with you. Like, I was speaking with some of the members at 350.org a couple of days ago, and we were speaking on specific asthma-related like considerations, especially regarding electrification residentially. So we can definitely scale up our speaking portions on that.
And then that goes into if you and we as a city are going to be communicating on this, what are the most effective media, and even within media, how do we get the word out? And I don't know if you know, but a dozen years or so ago, we had as we went to carbon neutral electricity, we had a group of gun students do a teen rap video on carbon neutral electricity in Palo Alto. It was an absolute hit. It went viral nationally, made Huffington Post. And it just goes back to kind of the sort of thing you would not expect, and had this emotion and all the ingredients that make it click for people in a way that they just, you shocked them, they weren't anticipating. So I've been really interested because student videographers, and we have our Teen Arts Council that has some really outstanding members, on the possibility of collaborating with your group on different themes of short videos. And I want to make sure you know that in addition to whether video labs you have at the schools, our new Palo Alto Museum has a really good video lab and would be available for this sort of program. So I wanted to just suggest that for consideration this coming year. And if you're interested, maybe we can brainstorm on what might be some of the biggest gaps we have in communication that this could actually fill, and not just for your group, but our whole citywide program. I just think that teens are better at this than we are. But we aren't tapping into it, right? Okay. And then I was on the mobility, really glad to hear that you guys are involved with the Safe Routes to School training. That is, because the sustainability of that program is really always important because it relies a lot on volunteers. And to hear that you guys are now becoming a major force there is fantastic. On the transit fairs, are you aware and promoting that Caltrain has the youth fair now? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, we have also talked about that in our presentation.
Oh, great. Okay, good. And any Caltrain promotion that you're doing, Caltrain may help promote it through themselves on what you're doing. And they're very proud of Caltrain is not only electrified now, but we're using carbon neutral electricity for the system. And so there's a real synergy, and they have their own PR programs that if you have something that you're doing that is driving that transit use, they could feature it and through Caltrain. And then my last, so you mentioned the new PAUSD sustainability coordinator. And so to what extent is your group working closely with that new capability at PAUSD?
This year, we did work fairly closely in helping her kind of set up some of the goals for PAUSD. This was her first year as a coordinator, and I think the first year the position was part of PAUSD. And so we kind of helped her brainstorm and set up some of her plans for her time at PAUSD. I think in the future, like next term, we'll definitely work closely again, not only as a contact point for PAUSD, like in schools, but also just because a lot of our mission has overlap, and so it just makes sense to me.
Well, and as Councilmember Liu mentioned, at first, it's really great that PAUSD has added that position, and it really sets the groundwork for even greater collaboration than we've already had between the district and the schools and the city. Of course, you extend beyond PAUSD to all of our schools, and I just think there's even more potentials there, and I'm real thrilled with that. Lastly, I just want to commend you on when you're talking about the elementary program. That just sounded great. And your whole approach toward kind of experiential learning was just spot on. And I just thought that was very creative. And what have you seen out of the response of these elementary kids to what you've been doing with them?
Yeah, I think electrification is a complex topic, especially for elementary schoolers. So it has definitely helped to simplify it into like tangible examples they can relate to. So I think the activity has helped. Also, the activity handouts that we give, which encourage them to learn about electrification in their own home and talk to their parents about it, have been helpful as well.
You know, and one other thing that strikes me is, like our city, you're experimenting with innovative approaches on different aspects of this. As you see certain things that you think are particularly successful, we should elevate those and look at how we can promote them outside the city, because all of the entities that are trying to move the ball forward on this, we're all breaking new ground and learning from each other. And when one entity has an innovative program or initiative or communication, let's look at ways and opportunities to share that and leverage what we're doing and have a far greater impact than just what we're doing locally. So be thinking about the ones that are your biggest successes and how we might be able to then help leverage that. So thanks again.
Thank you so much for the kind words.
George, you had another question?
Yes, a little bit rusty after some time away, but I had a question, a really difficult question actually, that I have not been able to figure out, and would love your take about
No
safe routes
softball.
to school and basically the proportion of students who cycle to school every day. And since 2019, that has been plateauing some years, but generally tapering off. And seeing your work on seeing your work on safe routes to school, on advocacy for San Antonio transportation and bike lanes, can you help me think, and maybe we could also follow up offline, what it would take to sort of change the curve of getting more students cycling to school, and what kind of education or incentives or programs or something. What issues is the city not seeing? What else should we be thinking about? And what could you potentially do to change that trend?
Yes, that's a great question. I do think there's definitely different layers to this question. I think one of them is just individual schools. There are like small barriers to biking sometimes. For example, Palo Alto High School, our previous years, our bike cages have been full. And so this year, what we've done is we've implemented a new section of bike cages. And hopefully that just makes it more convenient and easier for students to bike. So small actions like that actually definitely do make a difference, I think. I'm also curious, is the data you're referencing, does it count like e-bikes or e-scooters as biking as well?
My understanding is that it does count e-bikes and e-scooters, and it counts whatever is sort of at the racks. And in 2019, the high schools had 51%, I guess, of trips estimated based on the racks were cycling or scootering, and then it was 37 in 2024. So it's quite post-COVID, it's been a gradual decrease that hasn't quite recovered. So that's I can see how quality of life improvements are something that we should push for. And if there are any other thoughts, I would love to hear them, or we can continue this offline.
I would just want to add one anecdotal piece is having just interviewed the new cohort of YCAB members. One of the themes that came across for Safe Routes to Schools was we need better parent education, because a resounding theme was, I want to bike to school, but my parents won't let me because they think it's too dangerous based on where they live, because they have to cross Alma or they have to cross Embarcadero, and the parents think that's too dangerous.
Got it. Thank you.
I think, sorry, I also think this is like a very like tangential point, but I also think there might be like a kind of concern about like, I don't know about Pali, because Pali has Town and Country right next to them. But Gun is kind of, I go to Gun. Gun is kind of located in a spot where not much else is accessible by bike. And especially upperclassmen, I feel like have this tendency to, after they're done with like right after school ends, they want to go somewhere and have some fun. And by bike, I don't think that's as accessible as with car. And I think a lot of people like want to be able to have that, luxury of being able to go where they want to. This is not, I don't think this is something that can like directly be addressed, because we can't just suddenly put like a whole bunch of like things to do right next to Gun. But I do think that just is one of my considerations from what I've seen around my friends at school.
That's really interesting. Do we have data that separates out the two high schools so we can tell if there was an impact there? Because do we know if
We do.
there's a differential like that? George looks like he's looking at data.
It looks like actually looks like Gun and Pali have fallen similarly. Pali was at 52 and Gun was at 50% bike share, and now they're both at around, or as of 2024, they're both at 37%. There might be more recent data that I'm just like not pulling on the website, but
I just note that from I have a lot of discussions with the Safe Route School leadership, and things completely fell off in the first year or two of COVID. And then even as that program started coming back, we had cohorts of elementary school kids who had never had the basic program. They missed it. And so as they go through the system, that's part of it. And then there's a phenomena that is basically either the less or the more people are driven to school or drive, the more cars there are going to school, and the more unsafe it is to go to school. So it's a vicious downward cycle, or one that we work very hard over 20 years, 25 years to work the other way. So when we've had that decline, it creates more of those circumstances that you described of parents being hesitant to let their kids ride because in some ways it's even less safe. But then it's also this whole phenomena of a positive social norm. When it becomes the norm to ride and the virtuous thing to ride, then more people ride. And so how do you do that through communication and modeling and all those things? It's not simple, but that's been what the Safe Routes to School people have been working on for 25 years. And there's no panacea, but a bunch of work can move it in the right direction.
Well, I echo my colleagues' kudos to you for all you've done. I think it was Jenna who mentioned that is appreciative of the opportunity to bring student voices to the issues. And I would say yes, and those student voices are there. And what I appreciate now about YCAB is it allows us to hear them more directly. So you all, in many ways, are ahead of our generation on these issues. And so I think it's just, I'm delighted that this is growing in effectiveness to help us sort of partner with you on the way you see the world and how you experience it, because that's going to carry on for the rest of your lifetimes. So it's just really important what you're doing. I did have a question just about the Palo Alto Public Transport 101 video, speaking of the way you all might communicate in ways different than ours, which, by the way, sounds fabulous. Did you also have like digital docs or collateral so that people can't remember what all they saw about that they could, access? Because I love the idea of this public transport education.
That's a really good point. I don't think we had collateral material on that video. Jenna, do you remember if we had QR codes at the end of it?
I believe the plan was to put QR codes, and I think they were supposed to be distributed with QR codes, but I'm not exactly sure how it went down at Castellea. But what I can speak to is when we did the Hausner presentation at one of the private middle schools, we did give out flyers with information and QR codes and the youth clipper card signups. So when we do in-person presentations, we do give out handouts, but I don't think we've necessarily found a digital manner as to which to distribute this. But I like your idea, Mayor Vinker, of kind of giving digital handouts in addition to these videos as well.
Well, maybe that's something you can explore next year. It's just sometimes people hear something, then they can't remember, and they don't have the time to look it up, and then they don't try it, and then the enthusiasm wanes. So I just want to, leverage your good work on that front. And, like my colleagues, what really struck me was all the student-to-student communication you've done at all levels, high school, middle school, elementary school. And I think that's just invaluable because other students are going to listen to you in ways they may not listen to us. And you're closer in age to all of them than we, and I think can relate to their experience in a way that's terrific. And I agree that then they take it home. And probably one of the most effective ways of communicating with parents is through their students. And by my calculation, when I add up the ones on slide 9, it's over 750 students that you spoke to this year. So that's a pretty amazing thing. And what I had scribbled down to ask you about is somewhat similar to what Pat mentioned, was whether, while we really want you to keep talking to Palo Alto students and talking to us, but was whether you've had any interaction with student groups in other cities, that kind of thing, because not just for them to hear what we're doing, but perhaps we can learn a thing or two or pick up something that they're doing that we want to bring home. And I was thinking about this because tomorrow is the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action Summit, which will be like almost 400 students. And so that's where we get a lot of cross-pollination. And I just want you guys to be part of that. So I don't know if you have thoughts about interacting with students outside our city.
Yes, we've definitely focused on Palo Alto. We have had a few interactions with other student groups. One was from Stanford, where we had conversations with a class about their project on e-bikes, and they were doing research on e-bike policy for both Palo Alto and surrounding Bay Area cities. And so e-bikes are a very pressing matter, I think, right now, especially for youth in Palo Alto. something that YCAB wants to tackle a lot next term. And we had good conversations about what type of policy can help and what they have seen other cities do as well. I know personally I've interacted with a lot of students from student groups outside Palo Alto. I think YCAB has not had as much cross-pollination as you mentioned, but I think it would definitely be valuable this following term to consider having more and sharing ideas with other groups.
Yeah, I definitely think that is also partially due to the uniqueness of our situation because the YCAP is technically affiliated with the city of Palo Alto, which we're so thankful for. And it helps us put ourselves up on a stage that gives us a little bit more credibility and helps us with all of our efforts. And although I think I'm pretty confident to say that all three of us and most members of YCAP are also part of external sustainability groups. And through that, we've had a lot of cross-pollination with, for example, like you mentioned, the Silicon Valley. Did you mention the Bay Area Youth Climate Summit? Or is it the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action Summit?
Well, there's
There's quite a few, yeah. But I think we've had a variety of different cross-pollination opportunities with them. But yeah, as YCAP, we're really grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. I also appreciate all of us do that. There are also bandwidth limits. You can't always do all the great things we want to do. But I do think perhaps a time or two that might be an interesting thing to take forward. So, well, thank you again for your efforts and thank you for taking the time to share your report today. And we look forward to seeing what happens in the next with the next cohort.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Okay, well, that started us off on a positive note. Okay, so let's move to action item 2, recommendation to City Council to accept the RWQCP Biosolids Facility Plan update as part of the Long Range Facilities Plan update and adopt park dedication ordinance for a portion of the Measure E site. So we'll turn it over to Steph.
All right, so my name is Tina Pham. I'm a senior engineer here with the wastewater treatment plant, and I'm happy to present our biosolids facility plan and park dedication ordinance. We also have Christine Polo here. She is part of our Corolla consultant team through, she is the biosolids principal technologist, and her team is working on the long range facility plan, with a major part of it being the biosolids facility plan update itself. Next slide. So here we have our recommendation as stated in the staff report. We'd like to recommend that the plan is accepted and also recommend adoption of the park dedication ordinance. We recommend that the committee also direct staff to carry out the recommendations from the plan as listed here and will be described in detail by Christine. Next slide. So our agenda today has a few different topics. I'd like to spend some time going over Measure E background. Then I'll talk about the Regional Water Quality Control Plan and our current biosolids practices. Then Christine will take over and discuss the biosolids alternative evaluation, talking through key findings and recommendations, and also their strategic roadmap to implement the biosolids management strategy, and we'll reserve some time for Q&A. Next slide. So before we get into it, I'd like to point out to the group where our wastewater treatment plant is. Right in the center here in this slide is our wastewater treatment plant. To the north is Palo Alto Airport and Golf Course. To the west is Office Park, and to the east is the Baylands. And so the Measure E site is 10 acres directly south of the wastewater treatment plant. And I'll have another slide with a close-up to be able to show Measure E better. Next slide. The next slide again. So here's the map showing where Measure E is directly south of the plant. This slide also intends to describe the objectives and key features of Measure E. So to give you some history, in November 2011, residents of Palo Alto approved a ballot measure that was written and advocated by residents to undedicate and remove approximately 10 acres from parkland. This was approved by 63%, which shows significant community support. The main objectives of this item was to provide a reliable long-term solution for organics, which there are 3 types: biosolids from wastewater treatment, food scraps, and yard trimmings. Key feature of Measure E is that the 10 acres could only be used for treatment of the 3 waste streams I mentioned. And if the city wants to do anything else with that land, other than treat these 3 waste streams, then another ballot measure would be required. Next slide. So I include this slide to show that this item has been brought up to commissions, subcommittees, and council several times. Back at around 2022, the PRC recommended dedication of Measure E as parkland. In April of 2023, City Council had directed staff to do 2 different technical studies at that time. The first study was to determine the feasibility of supporting a wildlife corridor connecting Renzel Marsh to the Baylands. Results from this study was completed and brought to PRC this last June. Next, the second study that was directed to staff in April of 2023 was to determine if a 2.4 acre portion of Measure E should be preserved for a potential biosolids processing facility. The results from this study are being discussed today. After today, the aim is for staff to bring forth a biosolids facility plan in the park ordinance back to our city council this October. Next slide, and the next slide again. So this slide is intended to remind the committee that we are a regional facility that serves 6 partner agencies, and we provide wastewater treatment services to close to 260,000 people. Next slide. We are currently in the process of updating our long-range facility plan and also implementing projects from our previously completed one in 2012. And so here we show that we are working on roughly $500 million worth of work to rehabilitate our aging plan. And the takeaway from this slide is that we're extremely space limited. All these projects are shown here. This makes biosolids planning for the future quite difficult. Next slide. So back to biosolids, because that's what we're really talking about today. As part of our treatment process, currently we remove solids from our wastewater, then we thicken it, we blend it, and we water it on belt filter presses as shown here on the left. These belt filter presses were built as part of our solids dewatering project in 2019 when we decommissioned our incinerators at that time. So the sludge cake that you see here is hauled offsite to 2 different processing facilities in Solano County and the other one in the Central Valley. Ultimately, these processes result in fertilizer byproducts that can be used for agriculture. Right now, roughly 63 wet tons per day is hauled from our facility. That comes out to about 2 to 3 trucks per day. And our previous biosolids facility plans had envisioned this to be a temporary practice until on-site treatment could be placed on site. Next slide. So regarding biosolids facility plans, the city is no stranger to them. We completed a similar evaluation several times in 2012, 2014, and 2019. And again, this one we're talking about today. And this is important because things usually change. Technology changes, regulations change, and hauling and treatment costs change. And so one of the other things, main motivators for doing this plan is relating to our secondary treatment upgrades project. This was designed and currently in construction right now, and is the largest capital project in the city's history. The main driver was to treat nutrients, including ammonia, but also with the wastewater treatment process change as a result of this project, it will increase the production of biosolids starting when the project is complete in 2028. This could be anywhere from 20 to 40% increase in biosolids. So we wanted to make sure these assumptions were worked into our current biosolids management strategy. Next slide. Next slide again. So this slide is meant to cover and summarize the biosolids facility plan update process. So we start with planning, then we go with alternative screening, where we had started with 22 alternatives down to 6. Then we went through a process to determine what our evaluation criteria need to be and determine the weights for them. Then Corolla completed a detailed evaluation of the 6 alternatives, and Christine can talk about that next. And then now we're here. We're ready to bring these recommendations to you guys. Next slide. So this one is important because we value community engagement, and we sought to involve the community in determining our study's evaluation criteria shown here. We had 3 public workshops to keep the community update on our progress. And we have a table here showing our evaluation criteria, where we started and where we ended up based on input. I also want to note that our partner agencies have been very involved with the process as well. We have kept them up to date in quarterly meetings, and they are in support of the study's recommendations. I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Thank you, Tina. So, next slide. These are the 6 alternatives that we evaluated in detail. So alternative 1 and 2 are the 2 offsite alternatives where the city would continue processing their solids offsite. And alternative 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the 4 on-site alternatives where the city would add additional processing facilities at the regional water quality control plant. So alternative 1 is the baseline. It involves continuing doing what the city is already doing, which is hauling to the 2 offsite facilities, the composting facility and the thermochemical hydrolysis facility. Alternative 2 would be moving forward with an offsite partnership. We evaluated several offsite partnerships, and the one that seemed the most viable at the moment was a potential partnership with the city of San Jose, which the city has been evaluating for the last 15 years or so. Right now, San Jose is moving forward with a P3 project. There's still a lot of uncertainties about what the project is going to look like. So depending on how that goes, it may or may not be feasible for a partnership with the city of Palo Alto. So that's kind of a tentative alternative. And then the 4 on-site alternatives, alternative 3 is mesophilic anaerobic digestion. This is a well-established technology for processing solids and produces Class B cake. Alternative 4, also well-established mesophilic anaerobic digestion with thermal hydrolysis process. It would produce a Class A cake. Alternative 5, thermal drying, would also produce Class A and would have an additional benefit of substantially reducing the volume of solids that are leaving the plant. And then alternative 6, drying and pyrolysis, is less well-established than the other alternatives that we evaluated, but we wanted to include it as a potential solution in case PFAS regulations require PFAS treatment in the future in biosolids. Next slide. So here are the life cycle costs. These include both the capital cost of any new infrastructure, as well as 20 years of operations and maintenance costs for these facilities, all brought together into a net present value. So the first 2 alternatives, the offsite processing alternatives, they don't require any additional infrastructure, and they are the least costly alternatives, even from a life cycle cost perspective. Both of those are about $144 million. And then the 4 on-site alternatives are all, as you can see in this graph, more than double the cost of the offsite alternatives over the life cycle. Of the on-site alternatives, mesophilic anaerobic digestion is the least expensive, and drying and pyrolysis is by far the most expensive. Next slide. So we didn't just look at cost, right? We considered evaluation criteria that consider cost, social impacts, and environmental impacts. So one of the important criteria was greenhouse gas emissions for the biosolids alternatives. So we did a comprehensive greenhouse gas inventory for the alternatives that included not just the processing at the regional water quality control plant, but also the hauling to offsite facilities and the processing at offsite composting, for example, and then also the land application of the biosolids, the beneficial use. So it also included both positive and negative emissions. What does that mean? The positive emissions are things like emissions associated with the natural gas use of the alternatives. And the negative emissions or avoided emissions are actually benefits to carbon emissions from these alternatives. So for example, by applying biosolids to land, that results in carbon sequestration and also offsets the use of synthetic chemical fertilizers that take a lot of energy and natural gas to produce. So those are the avoided emissions that you can see kind of on the bottom side of the axis. So overall, to put this in perspective, for example, alternative 1, the baseline, we estimated net emissions of 1,700 metric tons of CO2 equivalents per year. So when you see a number like that, what does that mean? So to put that in perspective, the emissions of one Bay Area resident are about 5 metric tons of CO2 equivalents per year. So 1,700 would be equivalent to the emissions of about 350 people. So that's relatively small, considering that the regional water quality control plant serves 260,000 people, right? One other thing to mention here is that a large portion of the greenhouse gas emissions for drying and pyrolysis was from their natural gas use. And both of these alternatives would require increasing the natural gas supply line to regional water quality control plant. Next slide. One other thing that we consider in the evaluation criteria was electricity usage and generation. And I wanted to show this separately because it doesn't play into the greenhouse gas emissions because the city already gets carbon neutral electricity, but it was still an important consideration. So these are the net emissions of the electricity usage and generation for the alternatives. And one thing to note here is that the alternatives that have anaerobic digestion produce biogas that would be used in engine generators to generate renewable electricity at the plant, and both of those alternatives would be net electricity producers. Next slide. So wrapping it all into the weighted evaluation criteria scores that you can see in this graph. So overall, the baseline and the offsite partnership, both of the offsite alternatives received the highest evaluation criteria score due to a combination of low cost and high or good environmental and social impact scores. And then the 4 on-site processing alternatives received lower scores relative to those. Of the on-site alternatives, again, mesophilic anaerobic digestion received the highest score. So it worked out quite nicely. It doesn't always work out like this. And when we evaluate alternatives, that the life cycle cost and the evaluation criteria scores lined up with the baseline having both the lowest cost and the best evaluation criteria scores and so on. So next slide. Wrapping it all up into our recommendations for the biosolids facility plan, we broke down the recommendations into near-term, midterm, and long-term recommendations. In the near term, which is about the next 5 years, we recommend that the city continue doing what they're currently doing with their solids, since we identified that as the least cost, highest evaluation criteria score alternative given the current landscape. And then over the midterm and long term, we recommend that the city track some key regulatory and market drivers that could drive the city to change to a different solids processing alternative. So on the midterm, we recommend continuing to track potential regional partnerships, such as the partnership with the city of San Jose, but there's also others that are in the works, and move forward with one of those partnerships if it's found to be viable. And over the long term, track potential regulatory drivers that could lead to the need to put in on-site solids processing facilities at the regional water quality control plant. And because over the long term, we are recommending potentially adding facilities, we're also recommending in the near term saving space at the plant for those potential future facilities. Next slide. So then we developed this roadmap to kind of wrap up all of those alternatives that shows you both what the current recommendation is and what the potential alternative pathways would be if regulatory and market drivers require it. The next slide shows what the current recommendation is, which is continue doing what the city is already doing. And then the next slide shows over the midterm, we recommend tracking whether there's viable off-site partnerships and if there is, moving forward with one of those partnerships. And then in the longer term, there may be regulatory or market drivers, next slide, that may require producing Class B. And if that was the case, we would recommend putting in mesophilic anaerobic digestion, since that was the least costly of the on-site processing alternatives and the highest evaluation criteria score. And then in addition to that, there could also be regulatory drivers in the next slide that could lead to a requirement to produce Class A biosolids. And if that was the case, we would recommend putting in thermal drying. And that would position the plant well for potential future PFAS treatment. So the next slide, if there's limits on PFAS in biosolids that are exceeded by the city's current concentrations, we would recommend putting in a technology like thermal drying and pyrolysis that would treat and remove the PFAS from the biosolids, producing a biochar product. One thing to note here is that while there are several facilities that have been kind of trying out pyrolysis of wastewater sludge, they haven't shown continuous, well-proven, reliable operations. So we wouldn't recommend installing a technology until it has shown reliable long-term operations at the scale of the regional water quality control plan. So there's some technological development that needs to happen before we would recommend this alternative. Next slide. So how does that look like in terms of footprint needs at the regional water quality control plant? As Tina mentioned before, this is an extremely site constrained plant. So we cited potential future facilities that include mesophilic anaerobic digestion, followed by drying and pyrolysis. And really the only way to fit these into the constrained site is to use that 2.4 acre portion of the Measure E site. So in this preliminary layout, we show the mesophilic anaerobic digesters at the Measure E site. It's those 3 blue tanks with space for a fourth in the future in orange. And then the drying and pyrolysis facility would be placed at the north side of the plant, where you can see those 2 large buildings. So that's just looking at what the solids footprint needs are. In the next slide, we've also been working on evaluating all of the city's needs at the regional water quality control plant over the next 50 years, including liquids treatment, recycled water, solids treatment, etc. And we've identified many, 100 projects, many of which over 100 projects, many of which require footprint at the plant. So this preliminary site layout shows what those projects could look like. And as you can see, it is pretty much using up all of the available space at the plant. So with that, I'll hand it back to next slide, and I'll hand it back to Tina to wrap it up.
All right. Thank you to Christine's group for clearly outlining the recommended strategy for what we would need to be doing in the near term, midterm, and long term. From the plant's perspective, it would be prudent for us to reserve space for future facilities. Next slide. So staff took into consideration Corollo's recommendations, but we also reviewed Rincon Consultants' recommendations regarding the wildlife corridor. And thus we came up with this compromise to reserve 2.4 acres for the water quality control plant. For the 7.7 acres here shown in green, we don't envision a need for it now or any time in the future for the wastewater facility control plant. So we recommend that it could be returned to parkland, and thus you see the draft ordinance in the packet. Next slide. So we have working group feedback from meeting with them on Wednesday, talked through a variety of topics, including fuel sources for the solid hauling trucks. The working group wanted us to emphasize the voter approved percentage as well, 63%. We confirmed global warming potential for nitrous oxide and methane that were used in the GHG analysis that Christine's group did. We also confirmed, and Christine mentioned this, that the biosolid GHG evaluation included scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions to compare the 6 different alternatives. Christine also provided some context on local demonstration scale pyrolysis projects. And then we also, again, discussed natural gas use for a few of these alternatives. So lastly, we end with our recommendation as stated in the staff report, and we'll take any questions. Or sorry, next slide.
Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. I think there's no pun intended, but there's a lot to digest. Sorry. So why don't we ask some preliminary questions, and then we can go to public comment, which I'm sure there will be some of, and then we can come back and discuss it further. So preliminary questions?
Sure. So a few of them. First, you mentioned early on PFAS issues and whether we would at a future point in time have regulations imposed. But first, my recollection is that when we looked at our PFAS levels a year or two ago, when this became elevated in our consciousness, were relatively low. On the other hand, I'm not sure that we would only want to respond if there were certain imposed regulations. We might want to put our own there, but that it may be a moot point if we are first at a relatively low level of PFAS, which I'd like to hear that data back. I'm not
Yes.
remembering what it was. Combined with both the process substitutions and the product substitutions that are driving down PFAS use and PFAS waste in waste streams, which we didn't have a lot of from manufacturing process and things. So I'd be interested in it's a statewide trend because statewide California has been a leader in this. What are we seeing in terms of declines in PFAS concentrations that are happening as a result of these statewide initiatives? And how might that allow us to anticipate, do we have a problem or not going forward? One point, you had a table that listed all the residents of ourselves and partner agencies, but we have residents and workers, and I assume that their waste generation is not equivalent. And so I don't know if there is a factor that for each worker, it equates to what fraction of a resident in waste generation. But if we're going to be looking at projections and proportionate shares of responsibilities and generation by cities, it's both of those things, but I'm not assuming workers generate the same amount as residents on a per capita basis. I was disappointed, but accept the reality of that the pyrolysis is not looking so promising. Brad and I went to the Silicon Valley Clean Energy facility that the Italian firm Bioforce Tech has had a pilot there. I still have a T-shirt that says that this T-shirt was printed with sewage or something like that.
Is that the one just north of here?
Yeah, it's Redwood City. And they were working on their bugs. I'd engaged with them starting 8 years ago when they were just getting going there. And of course, that the real problem that everyone who had been tracking this field was hoping was that the thermal capture from the exothermic reaction of pyrolysis would be able to create the drying necessary to create a dry enough feedstock to go into the pyrolysis. And it just doesn't seem to be able to have that balancing of dewatering that's necessary for pyrolysis. And consequently, as you showed, it has this supplemental methane use, which kind of defeats the purpose, unfortunately. So then I did have a question on, as we're looking at the alternatives that you've narrowed down for us, what percent of our remaining GHGs would be reduced if we went with the preferred process, which was the MAD, which is mesophilic anaerobic, and it's a wet anaerobic, right? Yeah.
Maybe I'll start with some of the PFAS related questions and then we can turn to Matt. And then definitely Christine will appreciate if you can chime in on some of the regulatory changes within PFAS recently. So PFAS doesn't originate at the treatment plant. It enters through our wastewater from, as you mentioned, residential, commercial, and limited industrial sources. And the city actively monitors PFAS levels in both our wastewater and biosolids, and that's part of regional efforts that we're a part of, and we're continuing to do so. That information is on our website. I don't have it right in front of us, but you're right that levels are comparable to other Bay Area facilities and significantly lower than industrial sources and lower than some of the regulatory targets and levels in other states. And so we feel that instead of removing it in wastewater, I think more promising efforts have been through our source control group in order to continue and track where it may be coming from and trying to minimize it in the collection system. Do you want to add anything, Christine, to the PFAS regulations currently?
Yeah, I'll add a bit. That was a great response, Tina. I'll add that the regional effort that Tina mentioned is with the Bay Area Clean Water Agencies and the San Francisco Estuary Institute, a research institution. And they measured PFAS concentrations in influent, effluent, and biosolids for several Bay Area agencies a couple of years ago. And in general found that concentrations in effluent and in biosolids are mostly from residential sources. They're relatively low because they're not, most Bay Area wastewater agencies are not industrially impacted. And as Tina mentioned, the concentrations for most Bay Area agencies, including Palo Alto, are lower than what other states that have implemented tiered limits for PFAS concentrations have established. So if California implemented the similar tiered limits like the ones that Michigan and Colorado and other states have implemented in the future, then the city would be able to still use their biosolids without PFAS treatment because the levels are lower than what the limits would be. However, we did want to plan for potential more stringent limits in the future, or like you mentioned, the city might decide they want to treat for PFAS even if the concentrations are very low. And then the next question was about the proportionate shares from residents and workers for the projections. So I can talk to that. We worked closely with the city and the partner agencies to develop the population projections. So we looked at several sources for populations projections data, including the city planning documents for the 6 partner agencies, and we came up with what we think might be kind of the most accurate projections for the future. It's a tricky thing to do. There's different documents with different numbers, but we had calls and communications with each of the 6 partner agencies to confirm that they agreed with the population projections that we were using as a basis for this master plan. Regarding the share of workers and population, that's not something that we accounted for, but that would be, I think that would require kind of additional detail from the 6 partner agencies, so it can be incorporated into the population projections for all of the sewer that comes into the regional water quality control plans. And the next one, was about pyrolysis, natural gas units.
The percent of remaining, I think it was about the percent of the remaining greenhouse gases inventory for the city and the impact that the mesophilic anaerobic digestion could have on that.
Yeah, thank you. If we could go back a couple of slides to slide 18. The one showing the greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, so you can see it here, the reduction from what the city is currently doing, the baseline, to putting in mesophilic anaerobic digestion. There would actually be a slight increase. I would say these numbers are about the same. So 1,700 and 1,700 metric tons per CO2 equivalents per year. So there wouldn't be a significant greenhouse gas reduction in that. The one alternative that would lead to a significant greenhouse gas reduction would be pyrolysis, but again, there's the challenges associated with that, including how well established the technology is and also the cost associated with that technology. And then I wanted to talk to natural gas use and
before you finish there, Christine, can I give a little more of context? So when you're looking at these numbers that are on the order of 1,700 metric tons per year, what we're still trying to achieve in terms of reductions to meet the 80% reduction goal is about an additional 220,000 tons reduction. So just to put that in context.
1,700 versus 200.
This is a total of 1,700. We're trying to reduce by 220,000.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's great.
7.1%.
Kind of great. Not great.
About 0.1%.
Yeah, so not that significant in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Natural gas use in the facility, the bioforest facility at Silicon Valley Clean Water. I have that shirt too. The Bay Area Biosolids Coalition recently toured back in April. We got to see the pyrolysis, the bio dryer and pyrolysis facility. Talking with their operators, they're very happy with the bio dryer. It's operating smoothly. They are not that happy with the pyrolysis unit itself. It wasn't running when we were on the tour. I don't know if it was running when you were there.
I think it was down temporarily.
Okay, it tends to be down, so that's why we're saying it hasn't shown reliable long-term operations. We want to see a process operate consistently for many years before we recommend it. So they've had a lot of issues with the material kind of gunking up the unit or other issues.
And I just mentioned, and these other companies may not have better solutions, but my recollection there was a Colorado-based domestic company, and then we engaged through, we have the Danish consulate here, very strong, and we had met with them 3 years or so ago about a Danish company.
Yes.
And I don't know if they are any more mature. I would say the Danish technology looked like more mature, sophisticated engineering built off of other foundations that they had.
Yeah, I have heard from the Danish wastewater agency that they are having similar issues as they are having at the pyrolysis facility here in Silicon Valley. I think the Colorado one you're mentioning is Chart Technologies. Potentially,
Sounds right.
There are several companies that are trying to do it. Many of them are having issues, even though the technology is well proven for other feedstocks like woody biomass. Wastewater solids is a difficult.
It's just the high water content, and
Mhm.
it's just, that's the problem.
Yeah. And then addressing your question about natural gas use, so they, in theory, with the bio dryer followed by pyrolysis, you can get net energy neutral and not need to add natural gas. But for a facility the size of the regional water quality control plant, I think they would need like 40 bio dryers. So instead of going with bio dryers, we went with a different kind of thermal dryer that would be more appropriate for this scale, and that one would use natural gas.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot I'm trying to catch up on, and appreciate the chance to ask some maybe basic questions. I'm curious what we've seen from the cost trajectory over time as we've looked at this project. I know there are vendors, companies, startups, trying to work in this space. Is the trajectory getting worse? Is it getting better? The, natural gas usage, greenhouse gas emission reduction, overall costs. What have we seen, and do we have any expectation things will maybe change in 5 years to the extent that affects what we decide to do now?
Yeah, great question. For most of the technologies that we evaluated, I would say the costs have been pretty consistent, and if anything, the costs have been increasing over the last decade or so, with overall construction costs increasing in the Bay Area and kind of all over the world due to world issues outside of our control. For the only one where I might expect a reduction in cost, because the technology is still under development, is technologies like pyrolysis, gasification, supercritical water oxidation, that could be technologies that could be applied in the future once well proven to treat for PFAS.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to think to what extent we, in the timeline slide, like how to think about the decisions we make now versus whether some of these decisions, including land use decisions, should be sort of held for a little bit while we watch technologies. But it sounds like there's some promising things, but there's nothing that we're just like waiting for tangibly in like the next X years that is worth punting a decision over. Okay.
Can I chime in really quick? One of the recommendations that Carlo put together was to reevaluate the biosolids facility plan every 5 years or so to try to catch any sort of changes that may happen within now and then. But again, we've done this plan several times, and it's pointed generally to the same direction.
Yeah, and this is a big plan to redo even every 5 years. What is the status of the potential San Jose facility? it seems like quite an appealing option in many dimensions. Even if it's sort of basically tied with the baseline and the valuation, is it more likely if we send a letter of intent, are they actually likely to want partners to contribute and share in that project? What do we know about the project, even at this sort of current nebulous phase?
Yeah, right now, the latest update is that they are working on a P3, trying to find, they put out an RFP to try to find a P3 partner to do design and construction and potentially operations of the facility. It would be a offsite for them, solid processing facility, but it's adjacent to their existing treatment plant. They have a plot of land that's available for that. The technology hasn't been selected yet. So depending on technology selection, they may or may not be able to receive unstabilized or undigested solids from the regional water quality control plant. And then they haven't selected what the size is going to be and whether they're going to have excess capacity to be a regional facility. And that might be, I think, communications and reaching out to them with a letter of intent or communicating with them that you're interested would definitely be helpful, at least to help you guys understand what the potential is there. And to let them know that if they did that, there would be kind of a market there would be clients for it. But I think ultimately, since it's going to be a P3, it's going to be up to the private partner, whoever that ends up being, to decide on what size of facility they build and what kinds of feedstocks they're willing to receive, if any.
Okay, so they don't know that we're potentially interested and might want some capacity or might want to work with them.
Yeah, can I just add, I've been in meetings with them on this topic as long as 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think there have been more or less continuous communications. along the way.
Okay, good.
Right, we have continuous communications with them. They've reviewed our biosolids facility plan and they also know that we are not the only agency interested in partnering up.
Okay, great. Well, actually, maybe one more question here. Not being familiar with the history of the Redwood City site, was it ever conceivable, or is it still conceivable anyway, that we ship and work with them to the extent they have any extra capacity?
I think that too. Okay, so they don't have extra capacity, so they send a portion of their solids, 80% to drying beds that are on site, and then the other 20% goes to the bio dryer and the pyrolysis unit when the pyrolysis unit is running.
Right.
And so the pyrolysis unit only has capacity for about 20% of their own feedstock, so they wouldn't have capacity to receive solids from other sites.
Maybe one last question for now about sort of land use at the facility. I sort of understand what's at play with the Measure E site, but I guess in general, it was interesting to see the layouts where sort of different things are rearranged. Like, and it seems like maybe like eucalyptus groves that are sort of at the east side are maybe sort of cleared and there's, facilities added there. To what extent could we relax the crowding problem at the regional water control quality plan by potentially easing some of our setback rules or allowing clearance of some eucalyptus trees that are not protected trees, for example? Is that, if we took that a little bit further, something that we considered in any of the layouts and that would actually allow us to restore parkland and be more efficient with the site?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the site is very constrained, as you know, and we've been for multiple decades trying to figure out how to fit everything in, which is why we wanted Corolla to do a 30 to 50-year plan. We've, in some instances, had to remove some trees, such as for the AWPS site, because there was really no other way to fit kind of that big, site to the west of the the site, rest of the plant. And we've also as well considered property acquisition as well toward the office park area. In terms of setback, that's something that has we've been abiding by for several decades and we think is in general a good thing. Because it is really only 20 feet or so. I don't know if we would be able to save a lot of space in terms of putting new facilities on there if we were to get rid of the setback, but definitely being more strategic and careful with our current usage and expansion in some areas would be where we're focusing our efforts on now.
Got it. Just getting that there's not too much juice to squeeze there, which is
Right.
what I expected. But wanted to check. Thank you.
I just want to follow up on a couple of those things. The San Jose facility, do you have an expectation of any sort as to whether or not they would likely have capacity? Is that fleshed out at all? And do you know, when you talk about the others who might be interested, do you think it would be a competitive type situation or just, do you have any feel for that?
I don't know, unfortunately, whether it's going to be just processing their solids or a larger regional facility. In terms of whether there would be interest and competition, I think there would be interest and competition because particularly in the Bay Area over the last 5 years or so, a lot of agencies have been seeing dramatical increases in their cost of offsite hauling and offsite processing. So there would likely be interest if the tipping fee is competitive at the San Jose facility.
We're not the only ones. It could be similarly situated
Yeah.
entities. Okay, thank you. And then I also wanted to ask about the siding. In fact, can we put slide 29 up, please? Yeah, all right. So I think that, yeah, so the MAD powered or pools or whatever facilities are the three orange circles on the right. And it was interesting on slide 28, there was a fourth for future expansion. I think it was just above there. Yeah. What I'm trying to understand is a bit like what George was pursuing, but maybe looking at this, you can describe it a little bit to me. So if we can go back to 29, so we see the thermal drying and pyrolysis facilities there at the top. And would that displace what is there currently, or what's going on there?
Yes.
Yeah, there is available space there. So right now there are trickling filters that are going to be decommissioned because the city will no longer need them because they're putting in the secondary treatment upgrades. There's also
There's the engineering trailers that are currently being rented, and that rental can go away as soon as the engineering group is able to move into the new lab building across the street. That's one of
Okay. So is there something about the MAD equipment that it can't go there? Is it something about how it relates to the rest of the processing, or because it does not look significantly bigger than the space for thermal drying and pyrolysis?
Yeah, the map could also go there. We actually developed for the biosolids facility plan, we developed layouts showing MAD at either the north side of the plant where the thermal drying and pyrolysis are currently shown, or at the Measure East side, and show that it would fit in either position.
So if it would fit at the top position, would we not need the Measure E side?
If you may need it in the future for thermal drying and pyrolysis or for some sort of PFAS treatment.
Right, but that's what I want to understand.
Mhm.
For what are we preserving it? Not necessarily the currently preferred option, but
Right.
perhaps for the thermal drying and pyrolysis.
Exactly. It's for future potential on-site facilities that may be needed if regulatory drivers require them.
Right, yeah, depending on what we chose, we might be able to have something that's not baseline or not San Jose on site without that space.
Yes.
Okay. Then my last question for now is related to here we go. So you mentioned in 2023, you'd asked about a study on the feasibility of a wildlife corridor there. And there wasn't a lot in the staff report about it, and I don't think it was attached, maybe it was. I didn't see it in the attachments. Can you tell us just a little bit more? It says it would require substantial excavation. Do we have any sense of the cost? It talks about hydrologic connectivity. I think that's referencing to around the other side, not that way. I'd just like to understand that a little bit. And then if that's not done, it said in the staff report that we might get greater value from targeted habitat enhancement. I don't know what that is. So if you could talk about those things, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll briefly introduce kind of what the study found, and I'll also call on Anastasia, who's on the line from Rincon Consultants who completed that study. So in general, we asked that Rincon evaluate whether a wildlife corridor would be feasible within the 2.4 area portion of the Measure E site, and they found that it is possible and potentially feasible. However, there may be other things that the city may want to focus on and implement instead of it because of some of the negative impacts such as excavation and cost. Anastasia, can I ask you to chime in as well?
Sure. Hi. So the conclusions of our feasibility study were that given the costs and significant excavation that would be required to create an actual habitat corridor with habitat in it, so like to create the appropriate slopes for strips of tidal marsh or upland transition zone habitat to be present, there would be a significant cost. And given the development of the horizontal levee and the access road that goes between the horizontal levee site and the treatment plant, as well as additional utilities, there wouldn't be a continuous connection. There would still be a paved area and a culverted area. So the wildlife habitat corridor benefits would be limited, particularly as related to cost. And we recommended habitat enhancement at either end of the Measure E site, particularly in the Emily Renzel wetland side. And then habitat enhancement within the Measure E corridor, or the area proposed for a wildlife corridor that would benefit species that could use the site, such as monarch butterfly, bumblebee, nesting birds.
Okay, so at either end, it seems like that's certainly at the one end is where there are things cutting across. So I'm not sure I'm fully following, but just could you give us a sense of cost? Because, for example, if we think that we're gonna that some of the things when we look at the timeline are 15 to 30 years away, I'd like to know how much it would cost to enjoy 15, 20, 25 years of a wildlife corridor or not. So do we have any ballpark size on that?
I think it was $100,000 to $500,000 for installation and maintenance over 5 years.
So a total of 100 to 500 over 5 years. So not per year, right? I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do not have the exact cost of the.
That sounds small.
Do you have that cost? That was for the restoration we were proposing.
Because I think it's important to know, as we're trying to balance off, even if we went with this plan, could we have our cake and eat it too? Perhaps not, but perhaps so, depending on cost as a factor.
Right, we can get back to you with some of those costs. I think what Anastasia was referring to is the proposed solution, which would not be a full-blown wildlife corridor with excavation. It would include planting of native plants in that area, and it's similar to what PRC had recommended as well. Would be better preferred. and least impactful and cost-effective solution instead. So that would be on the order of a couple $100,000 up to $500,000 over 5 years.
That's correct. That's the number I saw in my report. But I do not have the specific numbers for the proposed alternatives of developing the wildlife corridor. But I would imagine they're over $1 million, given the volume of excavation that would have to be done.
Director Ellison, did you have something?
Well, really, I just wanted to confirm what Anastasia just said. So there's two different possibilities we're talking about here. One is enhancing the kind of area from what it is now and has been for quite a while to give some more wildlife value without having what we would call a wildlife corridor, which is trying to connect the tidal marsh and all that excavation.
No, I get that. I was just curious how much option A and option B cost, because that's a factor. And on option A, not the corridor, but I don't know, it's like a Q-tip, I guess, at each end, you're gonna put a little more. I don't really understand exactly what that looks like, especially at the end near the Renzel Marsh, away from the bay, because that's where there's that turnaround and a drive-through. And which side of that are we talking about? I mean, do we have any information on that?
I don't think we've gone through the detailed design to outline that yet.
Okay. So the feasibility of the wildlife corridor seems to have a lot of questions with that. All right, why don't we go to public comment now and we can pick it up after that. Madam Clerk?
We currently have 3 requests to speak. Our first speaker is Stephen R.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name is Stephen Rosenblum. I'm a resident of Old Palo Alto. And I'd like to thank the commission, the Sustainability Climate Committee, for all your hard work in trying to bring Palo Alto into a compliance with a safe climate in the future. I think this discussion is certainly part of that. I support the staff recommendation to retain the 2.4 acres of the Measure E site for future development. This is based on the fact that I was involved in the original Measure E campaign, which got almost 65% approval of Palo Alto voters. And that approval, I think, was based on the fact that Palo Altans want to take responsibility for dealing responsibly with their bio waste, and they don't want to be foisting it off on other people to take care of. And as the staff has pointed out, there's a lot of uncertainty in the future about what we'll be needing to do that job. And aside from the handling of the waste, there's also the issue of climate impact. I think, that's one of the names of this committee, sustainability and climate. And I think that we need to really think carefully about those aspects. One of the points that the staff made was about natural gas use for drying. I'm not sure they know about heat storage batteries. There's a company in San Jose called Antora Energy, which uses off-peak electricity to heat up carbon blocks in an insulated building, and then use that heat later for industrial heat processing. And they can generate temperatures up to 2,400 degrees Celsius, which I'm sure way exceeds what's needed for thermal drying. You could probably use that for pyrolysis as well. In any case, it requires the construction of a small building with carbon blocks in it, and then a pumping system for blowing air through it. And the fact that it uses off-peak electricity allows it to use cheap electricity when there's excess solar available. And then, I'm not sure how much more time I have left. 28 seconds, great. So the last thing I wanted to say is about the use of biogas to generate electricity. I think that's a really a climate non-solution. First, because the methane leaks and it's 86 times more global warming than carbon dioxide over 20 years. So we shouldn't be using that to generate electricity. And besides that, it generates NOx and PM 2.5, which is also polluting. So I don't think we should consider that. And I think the Antora avoids the extension of natural gas, which Palo Alto is trying to avoid in general. So thank you. I'm sorry, Randall, what were we doing?
Our next speaker is Peter D.
Good afternoon, Peter Dreckmeyer, Alton resident, and I was one of the leaders of the Measure E campaign, which got 64.6% of the vote. So check the registrar of voters. When Measure E was approved by 64.6%, it was all flat. And some time passed, and the late great Phil Boble, who everyone loved and respected, came to us and said, "Hey, we have a little bit of a dilemma. We have enough material to complete the landfill, but that means filling that 7.7 acres. That would allow us to get rid of equipment that we're paying for, staff that's sitting around waiting around. Would you oppose this?" And we talked about it, and we did the reasonable thing. We said, "Phil, you got to do what you got to do. We've been trying to be reasonable all along." In the initiative itself, we put in the language that after 10 years, any land that wasn't used, the city could reclaim that as parkland without going back to the voters. So our interests have always been Palo Alto and the environment. You will recall a few summers ago, there was a huge toxic algae bloom in the bay, killed tens of thousands of fish. That was fueled by nutrient pollution from wastewater treatment plants. The Regional Water Board came up since then with a new regulation. Palo Alto was pretty well prepared. Thanks a lot to Phil and others who have been managing the system and thinking proactively. San Francisco, on the other hand, they're spending $1.5 billion to address that regulation. So as we know, they fall behind on maintenance of infrastructure. That's why our Hetch Hetchy water is so expensive now. So we really need to plan ahead. And Palo Alto in general does a good job with that. The truth is, no matter what happens to the 2.4 acres, people aren't going to notice the difference because the proposal is to plant native plants there, make it look a little bit better. And it's not until a decision is made, there's no rush on that, whether that land would be used for infrastructure or not. So all that dedicating that back to parkland would do is make it more challenging if in the future, for PFAS or for contaminants of emerging concern, all these things that we're not aware of, we weren't expecting that toxic algae bloom a few summers ago. We have to go back to the voters. That costs money. You have to run a campaign. So no one's going to notice the difference. It's just a matter of holding on to that option for when we need it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Bruce H.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity to comment. So I too have been involved in this debate since 2011 or thereabouts, and have attended many of the workshops that have been held over the years. And I have to say that the current staff analysis and recommendations are amazing. Just a level of detail and analysis which exceeded the previous analysis. So I believe that these recommendations are, as I said, based on this careful and extensive analysis, and it arrives at a sensible solution, which is to add the slope portions of the Measure E side to the Bixby Park and to retain a small flat portion for potential use by the Redwood RWKC beam. I also support, unfortunately, there are recommendations for continuing the trucking our waste to the Central Valley and other places. Reps and also was involved with bioforce and pyrolysis and all that. So maybe in the future, the two quotes from the study summarize the situation very nicely. The analysis found that while enhancing hydraulic connectivity across the site is technically feasible, ecological benefits to special status species are limited. The constrained width of the site, adjacent industrial and recreational uses, and existing disturbances reduce the effectiveness of the corridor for meaningful wildlife movement. In some cases, the corridor would introduce potential adverse effects such as increased predation or loss of existing habitat. Based on the recommendations from the BFP updated wildlife corridor feasibility analysis, preserving flexibility for the future of the RWQCP facility use remains an important consideration. Staff recommends preserving the approximately 2.4 acre portion of the Measure East site. And it should be reserved for future needs. And so my hope is that the adoption of this recommendation, which is a compromise, will end a long-running dispute in the environmental community here in Palo Alto and clear the way for more meaningful actions from the city and other more western areas. Thank you, Senator.
Our next speaker is Cedric B. on Zoom. Cedric, you should now be able to unmute yourself and begin to share your comment.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for having this session. Looking online, it looks like there are efforts underway to achieve pyrolysis using renewable energy instead of natural gas. So I think it would be good to keep an eye on these efforts and see if they are applicable to our biosolids volumes and whether they might be more successful over time than some of the pyrolysis efforts you discussed earlier. The MAD plus THP can reduce the numbers of trucks hauling solids, and they have the least actual emissions and lower net emissions than the current baseline and offsite partnerships. They also have currently less technological risk than pyrolysis, but it seems to require the use of the flat part of the Measure E site. I heard the staff or consultants say that while the MAD itself might be able to fit without using the Measure E site, if we wanted to have both the MAD and future compliance for PFAS reductions or thermal drying, we couldn't do both of those things, the future-proof layout, without saving a portion of the Measure E site. So given the importance of reducing actual greenhouse gas emissions and net carbon impacts, and the uncertainty around pyrolysis and its potentially high methane use, I think it is highly prudent to retain the flat portion of the Measure E site to accommodate the MAD plus the THP or other technologies in the future. Also, just as a side note, I observed that the slide that had the layout for the MAD plus THP, it had a little bubble, it had a bubble numbered 10, but 10, the meaning of number 10 was not noted on the slide. Anyway, so I hope you will proceed with caution and retain the flat portion at least of the Measure E site. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Emily R.
Allows me to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, Chair Vinker and members of the Climate Action Committee, I urge you to recommend rededication of the entire 10-acre Measure East site, just as the Parks and Recreation Commission has twice recommended. You have received my letter to the Parks and Recreation Committee, and I would like to add the following comments. Of course, I support rededication of the 7.6 acre portion of the Measure East site, which are part of the completed landfill and would cost huge amounts of money to use, requiring reopening the landfill, reconfiguring it, relocating landfill infrastructure, and disposing of excess contaminated landfill materials. The 2.4 acre habitat corridor is, of course, the most important part of the Measure East site to be rededicated. It provides a key wildlife and hydrological connection between the bay, the 126-acre landfill, and the Renzel wetland sites. It also provides an important link in the loop trail around Bixby Hills Park. I would just note in response to someone else's remarks, there is currently a huge pipeline that runs under the road between the bay and a portion of the Renzel wetland, and that is to support the endangered salt marsh harvest mouse and provide tidal pickleweed habitat there. So there is a hydrological connection there now. So I'm not sure what this report's talking about. It was an unnumbered pages on the report, but staff report 8th page says the study found that the Measure E site already provides wildlife habitat and hydrologic connectivity between adjacent wetlands, and that constructing a new wildlife corridor would require substantial excavation, utility relocation, and ongoing maintenance while providing limited ecological benefit beyond existing conditions. But there is good habitat there now. There are about 5 acres of privately held properties along Embarcadero Way that adjoin the Regional Water Quality Control Plant. If the RWQCP partners want to plan for the long term, and they must, they ought to be looking into those properties instead of the Measure E habitat corridor. The 6th page of the staff report says the baseline current biosolids management and off-site partnership alternatives require no new on-site energy consuming processes with no additional natural gas or electricity demand beyond what's needed to address increased solids loading with time. The 7th page says the baseline alternative 1 and offsite partnership alternative 2 alternatives ranked highest across all evaluation criteria and sensitivity.
Time is up. Thank you.
Oh dear, I just have one more sentence. Both of these scored significantly higher than any on-site alternative. The 7th page also says that it's a long-term 2041 to 2055 recommendation. And that's going to hold this site hostage for 15 to 30 years. How old will you be in 2055? Please restore the entire 10-acre measure
Thank you.
site to park dedication. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Karen Peet.
Good afternoon, Karen Porter. I am a longtime Palo Alto resident and environmentalist, and I strongly support retaining at least 2.4 acres of the Measure E site. I think the city has a moral and ethical obligation to deal as responsibly as possible with its own bio-waste and not to ship it to other jurisdictions. I actually think we should be taking care of our own green waste, but I think that ship has sailed. So that's my first reason, and other people have addressed some of the technological issues and challenges. And if we can just preserve the location, see how technology can evolve, I think that is the most prudent action right now. My other reason for advocating to retain this site is, as was mentioned, it's south of the Palo Alto Airport. In fact, it's almost directly under the flight paths of arrivals and departures. Palo Alto Airport operations are a leading source of lead emissions, actually the highest source of lead emissions in this area due to the use of leaded gasolines and piston engine planes. And in my view, a reputable or responsible waste facility is the highest and best use. I'm all for wildlife enhancement, but there should be a balance. We need to responsibly deal with our own waste, which ideally involves dealing with the leaded gas at Palo Alto Airport, but I know that's another topic. So for these reasons, I would really encourage a recommendation to retain this acreage for potential responsible bio waste processing. Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes public comment on item 2.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a time issue we need to deal with. The fact is it's almost 4 o'clock, which is when this meeting's scheduled to end. I talked with staff ahead of time. I think we can stick around for 10 or 15 minutes extra, but we have to go back to the public comment, which we may or may not have. So friends, we can try to journey forth as fast as possible. Director Eggleston, looks like you have a suggestion.
Well, Chair, so I think we didn't provide as full information as we might have in the report about this issue of the wildlife corridor, which because of the analysis we had done seemed less like something that we would want to move forward with. I did have a couple paragraphs from the report to PRC, some of which Bruce Hodge read a bit of, but if you were interested, I could read that into the record and so that you can hear it if it would be helpful.
Yeah, I guess one of my questions is it necessarily an either or? I mean, could we not, I'm not saying this is necessarily the right solution, but if we did not rededicate the 2.4, we could still put that in there in the meantime. It might be ridiculous because it might be too expensive and it might be silly, but
it wasn't primarily focused on the cost. It was issues of how suitable the site was and what the gain would be, as well as potentially introducing even some hazards for special species.
yeah, no, I understand that too. But just on my either or, it could be an and. If it were feasible, but you're gonna tell me it's not for various reasons. So why don't you go ahead and read that?
It could, yeah, it's not an either or.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
if I might, is that even if we rededicated the 7.7 at this time, doesn't preclude the possibility at some future time to dedicate the additional 10.4, right? I mean, 2.4.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. Yes, I would like to hear it.
Okay, I'll try to be quicker. This is from the PRC report, which I think was in June on this topic. The analysis found that while enhancing hydraulic connectivity across the site is technically feasible, ecological benefits to special status species are limited. The constrained width of the site, adjacent industrial and recreational uses, and existing disturbances reduce the effectiveness of the corridor for meaningful wildlife movement. In some cases, the proposed corridor could introduce potential adverse effects, such as increased predation or loss of existing habitat conditions. Based on these findings, Recon concluded that a wetland wildlife corridor at this location would provide no or minimal ecological benefit and is not recommended as the preferred approach. Instead, alternative habitat enhancement strategies, such as restoring upland and wetland edge habitats, may provide greater ecological value with fewer constraints and lower implementation costs.
Right around the part about potentially introducing predatory species, could you just read that sentence again? Because there was something else in there I wanted to ask about.
Existing disturbances reduce the effectiveness of the corridor for meaningful wildlife movement. That part. In some cases, the proposed corridor could introduce potential adverse effects, such as increased predation or loss of existing habitat conditions.
Loss of existing habitat. So we're going to add habitat, but somehow we lose. That's confusing, but I guess we could move on.
Our consultant from Recon, Anastasia, has her hand raised.
Okay. Anastasia, maybe you can help me understand why doing a wildlife corridor reduces habitat.
Sure. So I think the proposed alternatives we looked at were expanding the existing culvert that Emily Renzel mentioned already occurs. So there is hydrological connectivity between Palo Alto Baylands Marsh and Emily Renzel wetlands. So the alternatives would be expanding that hydrological connectivity either through a couple different culverted designs, or looking at kind of an open air channel, or looking at an open air channel with vegetated edges. So it's specifically looking at developing a wetland corridor or a corridor to enhance the wetlands, but there is existing habitat for wildlife in that corridor. It's trees, a lot of landscape species, but that does provide habitat for wildlife. And our study found that targeted, this wildlife corridor, which would have been proposed to enhance habitat for special status species, particularly tidal marsh species like salt marsh harvest mouse and Ridgway's rail. Given the space constraints, it would not provide a sufficient wetland corridor to connect those two wetlands. So
Okay.
the recommendation, as Brian recommended, was to enhance the existing.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just worried about time, so I think I got it. I don't want to belabor this further, but thank you. I just want to ask one follow-up since I have the mic, and then we'll see if what we can do here today. But can you go back to that slide 29? When I look at, actually, you don't need to go to slide 30. I'm going to mention it, but when we talk about slide 30, the timeline, we've got the near-term recommendation for, continue the current offsite solids management approach, the midterm implement offsite regional partnership if feasible, and then long-term, the 15 to 30 years out, add on-site solids processing. I guess what I'm trying to understand is that it sounds like the Measure E site would be necessary, it might be preferable for other reasons, so that we could have both MAD and thermal drying and pyrolysis.
Yes.
And that's not one of the 6 options, though. That would be additional. So would we, so that's a very ignorant question here. So would things go through MAD and then those, or would they have different? So it would go through all 3. And why?
Yeah, great question. And it wasn't included as one of the 6 alternatives.
Yeah.
I understand where the question is coming from. It would be mesophilic anaerobic digestion followed by thermal drying and pyrolysis. And while there are some thermal drying facilities without anaerobic digestion upstream of them that are operating, a lot of them are having a lot of issues, operational issues, odor issues. So we would recommend putting in mesophilic anaerobic digestion or some sort of digestion technology upstream of thermal drying. And it would be both processes. So it would be the cost of MAD plus thermal drying and pyrolysis.
So you talked about thermal drying upstream of MAD, but then also the pyrolysis. Could it be with or without the pyrolysis?
MAD followed by thermal drying, followed by pyrolysis.
Yes.
You could also put MAD and thermal drying.
That's not my question. I understand MAD and then thermal drying, but then would you necessarily have pyrolysis at the end, or could you stop there?
Not necessarily, only if you needed to treat for PFAS.
Okay, and would you expect wouldn't necessarily need to bring all 3 of those online at once, right? So you could go to the MAD thing first and then see if you wanted to bring on the thermal drying and pyrolysis.
Exactly.
Assuming that the technology was, what did you say, qualified or whatever?
Well
established, which it is not at the moment. So, okay. I think I understand that. It's just, I think we're preserving the 2.4 in the recommendation for the technology that wasn't recommended. So it's just a little hard to wrap my brain around. I'm hearing it orally now. It's just a bit confusing. All right, colleagues, thoughts?
I think the staff recommendation is well reasoned. I think it is a compromise that does the right step of trying to move as much forward on parks as possible. The site is still extremely tight. The 2 acres that we would retain under the staff recommendation is still quite limiting, but I think just given the time and some of the uncertainty about technology and costs, that it's a good balance to move forward with. So I would be happy to move the staff recommendation, unless there's any further discussion that we want to have before a motion.
I expect there's further discussion, but it's your option to move or not.
Okay, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Well, I will second it, and I have a hard stop. I mean, we had talked about this.
Well, that's what I was trying to talk about earlier too, because I do as well. So do you want to say anything about your motion? No. Okay, what, we can go ahead. I think that, I'm just gonna say, I think it's just perhaps the, profession I've been in, watching technology evolve and evolve and evolve. I believe in it. I'm not sure we need this 2.4 to do the things. I like having space for this. I like this new technology that's coming on. I think we may have the space for it. So I'm not going to say no to it at the end of the day, but right now I'm not yet ready to recommend to council that to support the staff recommendation. I'm looking forward to coming to council. Hopefully some of these additional things can be answered. I think that we could stage it such that we do the one and then the other. And by the time we get to the third, it's so speculative. And I think we have space to do it. So I'm not objecting to MAD or pyrolysis or anything per se. I just haven't been convinced yet we need to do it this way. So I'm just wanted to explain why I'm not supporting it now. I would maintain an open mind and we'll look at it again when it comes to council. So any more discussion or should we call a vote? Nope. Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Vu,
Yes.
Chair Finker,
No.
Councilmember Burt,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. All right. And with that, we'll just go to is there any online public comment?
There is no virtual public comment. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Anything crucial you have to say, Director Eggleston, before we adjourn?
We will have another meeting next month and it will be on. Sorry, I lost my notes. September 4th.
September 4th. Okay, very good. We will look forward to reconvening then. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. We're adjourned.
Thank you.